Mars has always been considered the most mysterious planet in the solar system. But strangely, the more people studied it, the more questions they discovered, rather than answers. Today, Mars is a cold, arid world with virtually no life. Giant dust storms sweep across red plains, stretching for thousands of kilometers. But what the probes found tells a completely different story. The riverbeds have dried up, ancient lakes, the remnants of massive floods, and mysterious signals continue to emanate from the Earth to this day. They all reveal an unbelievable truth. Mars was not always like Mars. It used to be a different world. And perhaps the biggest secret of the red planet isn't what exists on its surface. Rather, it is what existed before an entire world disappeared. While today we know Mars as a planet full of scientific mysteries, for many people, it all really started with a single photograph. In 1976, NASA's Viking spacecraft sent back thousands of images from the surface of Mars to Earth. This was part of an ambitious exploration program aimed at studying the red planet from unprecedented distances. Among the vast amount of data collected, one photograph quickly captured the attention of the entire world. In an area known as Cydonia, the Viking ship's cameras captured a structure that resembled a giant human face looking up at the sky. It has two dark sockets that resemble eyes, a protruding part that resembles the bridge of a nose, and the overall shape makes the human brain almost immediately associated with a face. The photo quickly spread throughout the world. For many people, this is more than just a hill. It looks like a man-made structure, a gigantic monument, or perhaps even the traces of a vanished civilization. In the years that followed, countless books, documentaries, and theories emerged surrounding this mysterious face. Many believed it could be the first evidence that Mars once harbored intelligent life. Interestingly, Cydonia's face appeared at precisely the time when humanity was captivated by space. Humans had only set foot on the moon a few years earlier. Questions about extraterrestrial life were being discussed everywhere, so it's not surprising that a photograph like that could have such a powerful impact. Later, as technology advanced, higher resolution orbiters captured images of the Cydonia region. These new images suggest it was most likely just a natural hill. The angle, lighting, and shadows in the 1976 photograph inadvertently created the illusion of a face. From a scientific standpoint, that's a plausible explanation, but the important thing is that the value of this story doesn't lie in whether that face is real or fake. Its value lies in the impact it creates. One photograph has caused millions around the world to begin looking at Mars in a different light. It has sparked greater public interest in the red planet. It has prompted many people to start asking questions they had never considered before. Did Mars ever have life? Was this planet ever like Earth? Is what we know about it truly complete? Sometimes in the history of science, important discoveries don't begin with answers. They started with curiosity. The Cydonia face may not be an ancient structure, but it did something very special. It drew the world's attention to Mars. And as scientists continued to study the red planet for decades afterward, they discovered something far more astonishing than any of its rocky faces. This is evidence that what was once a frigid desert may have contained things that we are now accustomed to seeing only on Earth. It's water. If the rocky face of Cydonia initially drew attention to Mars, it was subsequent discoveries that truly changed how we view the planet. The more they researched, the more scientists discovered an unbelievable truth. Mars today is a cold desert. But Mars in the past may have been completely different. When observing the surface of the red planet from orbit, researchers discovered structures that were very familiar. They didn't look like craters. They didn't look like typical geological fissures. They resemble riverbeds. Some of these systems extend for hundreds, even thousands of kilometers. They meander through the terrain in a way very similar to rivers on Earth. Initially, many people remained cautious, but then more evidence kept emerging. The survey vessels discovered areas shaped like river deltas. This type of landform often forms when water flows from highlands down to lakes or seas over a long period of time. One of the most famous examples is the Jezero crater, where the Perseverance spacecraft is operating today. Orbital imagery reveals that this area once contained an ancient delta with very clearly separated river branches. This leads to an important conclusion. If there is a delta, there must be a flow of water. If there is a flow, there must be water. And if there had been water for a long enough period, the environment there would have been very different from what it is today. But the story doesn't end there. The probes continue to discover many types of minerals that only form when water is present for extended periods. One of the most well-known minerals is hematite. On Earth, hematite is commonly found in environments associated with liquid water. When the Opportunity rover discovered large amounts of hematite on Mars, it attracted particular attention from the scientific community, because this is not a sign of a brief rain shower. It is a sign of long-term geological processes. Subsequent studies have revealed that clay, mineral salts, and various other types of sediments commonly form at the bottom of lakes or within aquatic environments. The individual pieces began to connect with each other. Ancient riverbed, ancient delta, minerals associated with water, ancient sediments. They all point in the same direction. Mars once had water. Not just a little water, and it could be a lot of water. Some climate models suggest that billions of years ago, the red planet may have possessed rivers, lakes, and even vast oceans. Its surface may have been much warmer, wetter, and more dynamic than the arid world we see today. That's what makes the story special. Because when you look at Mars today, it's hard to imagine that it once contained flowing water. Today, the average temperature on the red planet is around -60 degrees Celsius. The atmosphere is extremely thin. The pressure is so low that liquid water can barely exist stably on the surface. Everything looked like a dead world, but the ancient traces tell a different story. A story about a planet that once had rivers. There used to be a lake, it used to rain, and it may have once possessed much more favorable conditions for life. That is also why scientists today are particularly interested in Mars's past, because water is more than just water. In planetary science, water always comes with a bigger question. That is life. Wherever liquid water exists on Earth, life almost always finds a way to survive. So, as evidence of water increasingly emerges on Mars, a natural question begins to arise. If this planet ever had water for an extended period of time, if only it had a more stable climate, if it was ever more like Earth than we think. While dried-up riverbeds and ancient lakes suggest Mars was once very different from what it is today, the biggest question lies elsewhere. What happened to that world? How did a planet that once had water become a cold, barren land with virtually no life left? To answer that question, scientists must look deep into the history of the red planet itself. Today, standing on the surface of Mars, you would see an extremely harsh world. Temperatures frequently drop very low. The atmosphere is so thin that it barely protects the surface from radiation from space. Liquid water cannot exist stably for long periods. But billions of years ago, things might have been different. Many studies suggest that Mars once had a much thicker atmosphere than it does today. This atmosphere helped retain heat and created conditions for water to exist on the surface. The problem is that the atmosphere has disappeared, and the cause may stem from something that most of us never see: magnetic field. The Earth today is surrounded by a massive magnetic field. It acts as an invisible shield, protecting the atmosphere from the constant stream of high-energy particles emitted from the Sunday. Mars appears to have once had a similar mechanism. But at some point in the distant past, the planet's global magnetic field weakened and then disappeared. When that shield was gone, things started to change. Solar winds have been continuously eroding Mars's atmosphere for millions of years. This process doesn't happen in a day or a century. It spans geological timescales. But the final outcome is clear. The atmosphere is getting thinner and thinner. Its ability to retain heat is gradually weakening. Global temperatures are falling. The water on the surface began to disappear. Part of it freezes at the poles. Part of it is retained underground. A portion of it is gradually being lost into space. Over time, the rivers stopped flowing. The lakes disappeared. Systems that had been in operation for millions of years gradually collapsed. That's why many scientists view Mars as a record of a planet's death, because here we can observe the consequences of changes taking place on a global scale. A world that once had water, a world that once had a more favorable climate, a world that used to be more dynamic. Eventually, it became the desolate wasteland we see today. What's noteworthy is that this process doesn't require a massive explosion or an immediate catastrophe. It happened slowly, one step at a time, for such a long period of time that no living creature, if it existed there, could easily perceive the entire picture. That's also why the story of Mars is so fascinating, because it's not just about another planet. It tells the story of the fragility of things that seem stable. From a distance, a world with rivers and lakes seems like something very unlikely to disappear. But the history of Mars suggests otherwise. Even a planet can change completely. Even systems that have existed for millions of years are not permanent. If the biggest question of the previous installment was what killed a world that once had rivers and lakes, the next mystery forces scientists to look beneath the surface of Mars, because there is a strange signal that continues to appear to this day. That's methane gas. At first glance, methane doesn't seem like anything special. On Earth, it's a fairly common gas. It's produced from many different sources, from geological activity to living organisms. But on Mars, the story is different. According to scientists' calculations, methane cannot remain in the atmosphere of the red planet for long. Under the influence of solar radiation and chemical reactions, this gas will gradually be destroyed over time. That leads to a very important question. If methane is still appearing, then something must be constantly producing it. That's what has drawn particular attention from researchers. Over the years, probes and observation instruments have recorded surges of methane on Mars. Oddly, the amount of this gas is inconsistent. At times, it increases significantly, and at other times it decreases or almost disappears. Some data also suggests that the changes may be related to the seasons on the red planet. In other words, this is not an ancient trace lying dormant in the rock. This is a phenomenon that is happening right now. That's what makes methane one of the most fascinating mysteries of modern Mars. Scientists have put forward many different hypotheses. The first hypothesis relates to geology. It's possible that chemical processes producing methane still exist beneath the Martian surface. When water, rock, and heat interact under certain conditions, methane gas can be released without the involvement of life. This is a completely scientifically sound possibility. The second hypothesis relates to minerals. Some types of rocks can absorb gases over long periods and then release them when temperature or environmental conditions change. This may explain why methane levels sometimes increase and decrease cyclically. That is also the hypothesis that has attracted the most attention. On Earth, most of the natural methane is produced by microscopic organisms. They live in muddy swamps at the bottom of the ocean or in harsh environments where humans could hardly survive. So every time methane is detected on Mars, the same old question arises. Is there something living underground? It is important to emphasize that there is currently no evidence to prove this. No creatures were found. There were no direct signs of life. But it is precisely the inability to determine the origin of methane that keeps this mystery going. Unlike the rock faces of Cydonia, which are primarily a story about how humans interpret the image, methane is a genuine scientific phenomenon. It was measured, it has been noted, and it still hasn't been fully explained. Perhaps that's the most fascinating thing, because sometimes the biggest mysteries aren't the things that look like traces of ancient civilizations. Rather, they are tiny signals silently emerging in a world that seemed to have been dead for a very long time. If methane is the most fascinating mystery scientists are observing on Mars today, it also leads to a much bigger question. Did life ever exist on the red planet? This isn't a question that only appears in science fiction movies. In fact, it's been one of the most important research goals of Mars exploration programs for decades. What makes this question so serious is what we already know about the red planet's past. Today, Mars is a cold, arid world that is almost unsuitable for life. But geological evidence suggests that billions of years ago, it was very different. It used to have liquid water on its surface. It used to have rivers, it used to have a lake, it used to have a thicker atmosphere than it does today. And it is possible to maintain stable conditions for a very long time. These are the elements that modern science considers fundamental to life. On Earth, wherever there is water, energy, and a suitable environment, life almost always exists. From the deep fissures of the ocean floor to the harshest deserts, microorganisms survive in places previously thought impossible. Therefore, when looking at ancient Mars, many scientists believe that the planet at least once had a chance. Of course, opportunity does not equate to proof. To date, no fossils have been confirmed. No microorganisms have been detected yet. There is no direct evidence yet that is strong enough to confirm that life once existed on Mars. But interestingly, scientists haven't given up the search yet, because many of the answers still lie beneath the red dust that blankets this planet. It's possible life never existed. Life may have existed in the past, but only in a simple form. It is also possible that the last traces of it are still buried underground, in places that current exploration vessels cannot reach. What makes this story so fascinating isn't just Mars. It also relates to how we perceive our place in the universe. If another planet had once harbored life, even if it were just simple microorganisms, it would suggest that life might not be as rare as we once thought. And if that's true, the universe may contain many worlds that were once far more vibrant than we currently know. To this day, the question of whether life exists on Mars remains unanswered. But it is precisely this silence that makes the Red Planet one of the most fascinating places for modern science. Because sometimes, the biggest mysteries don't lie in the answers. They lie in questions that will continue to inspire humanity for generations to come. After all we've seen, from vanished rivers and ancient lakes to mysteries still hidden beneath Mars's red dust, perhaps the most thought-provoking aspect isn't the planet itself, but it lies within the individual. Today, when people talk about Mars, they often talk about a new beginning, a new world, a place where humanity can set foot and rebuild from scratch. That idea has always been very appealing, because deep down people often believe that if they could start over in a different place, things would be better. We live our lives that way too. When we encounter problems, we think that simply changing jobs will make us happier. Simply moving to a different place will bring more peace. Simply changing your environment will make things more pleasant. Just leave your current place and all the difficulties will disappear. But many times in life, after changing all the external things, we find that the old problems are still there, because they were never entirely dependent on circumstances. They lie in the way we think, the way we perceive life, and the way we confront ourselves. Mars also raises a similar question. Let's assume that one day humans actually manage to build cities on the Red Planet. Let's assume we can bring the most advanced technology with us, bringing with you the most up-to-date knowledge. It carries with it all the scientific achievements that humanity has ever created. But do we also bring our weaknesses with us? Will greed ever disappear? Will selfishness ever disappear? Will conflicts between humans automatically disappear just because we live on a different planet? The answer is probably obvious to everyone, because a new world doesn't automatically create new people. If the root cause remains unchanged, the result will eventually repeat itself in a different form. Perhaps that is the most profound lesson Mars can offer us. To change your life, you can't just change your circumstances. To change the future, you can't just change where you are standing. All sustainable change must begin from within, because humanity's furthest journey has not been from Earth to Mars. Rather, it's about moving from trying to change the outside world to having the courage to look back and change yourself. If you found the story about Mars thought-provoking, please leave a comment sharing what aspects of your life you think you need to change from within, instead of constantly searching externally. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to explore more mysteries of the universe and profound lessons for humanity.